history is often written in the blood of the conquered, and their voices are often silenced. There are wars that echo in gunfire, and others whispered in the shadows. Perang Bisik, the Whisper War, was both. Waged in the northern reaches of Malaya, this is the story of one of its final chapters, and of the last stand of the Malay resistance against Siamese conquest, where 200 defenders faced a 15,000-strong army at the fort of Kuala Kedah.
The term Perang Bisik, or the Whisper War, is not found in official military histories or scholarly studies. It is not the invention of some colonial administrator or learned professor. It is a name born in the hearts of the common people who experienced it, a phrase whispered in the shadows, passed down through generations in hushed tones and knowing glances. It came out of a century of cultural trauma and suppressed memory, of courage and cruelty and stories that could only be told in hushed whispers so as not to be heard by the invader. This is my story of that Whisper War.
For centuries, the northern Malay sultanates, Kedah, Patani, Kelantan, Terengganu, paid tribute to Siam. Golden flowers, known as bunga emas, were sent to Bangkok in solemn procession. It was ceremonial, symbolic, and most of the time the Siamese court left the sultanates alone. But that changed in 1821. The balance of power shifted. Siam no longer wanted tribute, it wanted control. That year, a Siamese fleet sailed into Kuala Kedah, claiming to pay a friendly diplomatic visit. But friendship gave way to fire. The fort was ambushed and overrun, the garrison massacred. Sultan Ahmad Tajuddin fled, tossing coins from atop his elephant to delay his pursuers. He crossed into Seberang Perai and finally found refuge in Penang, protected by British guns, but not by British promises of help. With the Sultan in exile, Kedah was dismembered. Siam partitioned the land into 4 smaller dominions: Kedah, Perlis, Setul, Kubang Pasu, each ruled by a Raja chosen by and loyal to Bangkok. Meanwhile, Sultan Ahmad Tajuddin waged a quieter war, writing letters, pleading for aid, begging the British in Penang to restore him. The British listened sympathetically, they nodded knowingly, but they did not act. The British were in an awkward political conundrum. In 1826, Captain Henry Burney signed a treaty with Siam. Britain pledged not to interfere in Kedah. In return, Siam would respect Perak and Selangor. It was a neat diplomatic arrangement, one that preserved peace between the two great powers. But that peace came at a cost. It abandoned the Kedah Malays to war. Not everyone in Penang approved of Britain's policy of non-intervention. British merchants, some sympathetic, others simply opportunistic, traded rice from the Kedah rebels for rifles and gunpowder. By 1831, the Sultan's son, Tunku Kudin, now well supplied, launched a daring campaign. With 3,000 men, he retook Kedah. But his triumph was brief. Siam retaliated with brutal force. The fort at Kuala Kedah was besieged for 3 months. When it fell, Kudin was beheaded. His severed head was sent triumphantly to the court in Bangkok. Still, the Malays would not surrender. In 1838, they rose up again, more desperate, more defiant. They swept through Kedah, liberated Patani, and even crossed into Siamese territory, laying siege to Singora, now called Songkhla. For a moment, it seemed the tide of war might turn for the Malays. But what arrived was an angry storm from Bangkok. 10,000 Siamese troops, hundreds of war elephants, siege artillery. The Siamese moved with precision and speed, severing the Malays' supply lines. The besiegers were surrounded, cut off and scattered. The survivors fled south, back to the battered, familiar ramparts of Kuala Kedah. Panic swept the Kedah countryside. Villages were pillaged, rice fields set ablaze, and the stories began to spread, faster than the fires and far more terrifying. British naval officer Sherard Osborn, no romantic, described what he saw. Prisoners, stripped naked, stuffed into hollow tree trunks, and roasted alive. Others were tied to platforms above growing nipah palms, the sharp shoot slowly piercing their intestines as it rose. Pregnant women were gutted open in wages over the child's sex. This was not war. This was annihilation.
The British were officially neutral, but they were also treaty-bound to Siam. So the Royal Navy agreed to a blockade of Kuala Kedah, preventing boats from bringing arms and ammunition to its defenders. Yet the Malays never fired on the British ships. The British ships did not fire at the Malays. And, near the end, the Royal Navy suddenly found itself reluctantly rescuing the very people their policy had doomed.
Thousands of refugees had fled down the Kedah River. They packed into every floating vessel they could find, rafts, prahus, canoes, overloaded and desperate. They had nowhere to go. They anchored beneath the protection of the guns of the British ships blockading their own town. Osborn wrote, "Some 3,000 souls packed into the vessels, women, children, the elderly. 2 births occurred that night on the water. Many of the boats threatened to sink alongside. We were forced to take the unfortunates upon our decks, adding still more to the scene of confusion." Meanwhile, the horror on land continued. The Malays, now driven by rage as much as fear, executed 300 Siamese prisoners. Each was stabbed with a kris and thrown into a dry reservoir by the roadside, a grim signal for the enemy to find. It was a warning. You will not take us easily. By March 1839, the Siamese laid full siege to Kuala Kedah. 15,000 troops surrounded the fort, armed with modern tower muskets. so called because they were forged in the armories of the Tower of London. Elephants mounted with swivel guns and artillery thundered at the walls day and night. The barrage was so fierce that even the Royal Navy pulled anchor and moved out to sea to evade any stray cannonballs from their allies. Then, across the river, the town of Kuala Kedah fell. Siamese snipers climbed onto the rooftops and began picking off the defenders of the fort. On the night of March 19th, 200 exhausted defenders launched a desperate sortie, hoping to dislodge the snipers and silence the artillery. But they were caught out in the open in a murderous crossfire. Many fell within minutes. The attack failed. There was nothing left to do. The final order was given to abandon the fort. Some slipped through on boats. Others swam, braving the current and the crocodiles. Most died. 15 of the Sultan's Rajput sepoys stayed behind to cover the retreat. They held the line with musket and cannon. None survived. By dawn it was over. The Siamese had taken the fort. Kedah's last hope had fallen.
Sherard Osborn, from the deck of a ship that had seen it all happen, wrote, "Nothing but a sense of duty could prevent one from sympathizing in the efforts made by these gallant sea rovers to regain their own. Like Spaniels, the natives of the Indian seaboard lick the hand that chastises them, but not the Malays, and we Englishmen should honor a race who will not bow to tyranny." Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please support the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. And I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until we meet again, cheerio!